I'm Christy Bishop, and you're listening to the What Nobody Tells Us podcast. Each week, I'll be exploring a topic that's often stigmatized, misunderstood, or simply left unaddressed. And we're going to be shedding light on the things that nobody tells us, but that everyone should know. Let's get started. Today's episode is a story of hope, of love, of coming together, and of weathering one of life's biggest storms. My guest is by the name of Janette Schwendeman, and she and I actually were introduced by her husband, Casey, who is a fan of my husband, Brian, and listened to him for a very long time on the Adam Carolla show, and now through his podcast hosting gigs at the LA Magazine podcast. He was also a listener of my commercial grade podcast back in the day where I gave people the behind the scenes look into how advertising campaigns are made. And he had reached out to me a long time ago. And I missed the email on my website. And when I revamped my website this year to talk all about what nobody tells us and this new podcast and my new caregiving coaching and workshop venture and all of those things, I saw his email. I was like, oh my God. But the long of the short of it is, Casey was like, my wife is an absolute hero. Their daughter, Josie, is their third child. They have an older daughter and a second child with their son. And they went for number 3, and they had this beautiful, beautiful little girl. And her name is Josie. And at 11 weeks old, Josie was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, also known as ALL. If we want to get really technical, it also has and a little addendum, it's ALL with KMT2A. And God knows those things just roll off the tongue. It's the same thing with Brian. It's like astrocytoma, grade 3 with la mutation, blah, blah, blah. No idea. It's my own husband's tumor and I can't even remember what it's called because it's so complicated. But Janette has been not only a business owner running her own investment firm for years. She's a total career go-getter. She's, like I said, the mom to 3 kids. She is a wife. She's a friend. She's all of these things. She became the caregiver for her daughter, Josie, who was diagnosed, again, at 11 weeks, but I believe it was in 2021. So this was during the height of the pandemic when people who were going into hospitals were not allowed to leave and they were unable to have any visitors. So Janette so beautifully details her story and her philosophy and the story of love and strength and community around Josie, her diagnosis, the way that her family came together, the little fivesome that they have, and the way that they've weathered this storm. And spoiler alert, Josie is now in remission. She went through a full bone marrow transplant. Her brother was a perfect match donor. And as of recording this a few weeks ago, they had another scan and Josie is 100% cancer-free and all of her cells reflect 100% donor cells. So this is a incredible, wonderful story with a very happy ending thus far. And she is just the happiest, most precocious, beautiful little girl. But I wanted to share this story because so many families out there are struggling with a sick child. And it doesn't have to be leukemia. It can be many other different ailments, many other different illnesses, but they enter a reality that very few other people understand. And not dissimilar from, actually, I believe it was like episode number 3 that I did with Molly, who runs a foundation that delivers what I call happiness on horseback, where they actually bring horses to the homes of terminally ill and just children with really, really bad diagnoses and going through chemotherapy, whose neighborhoods and whose communities don't know how to support them. So, ironically or unironically, they kind of just back into the hedges. They kind of disappear. And there's nothing worse than feeling alone when you're going through the battle of your life and the battle for your children's life. So this episode really shares their philosophy, how they did that, what worked, what did not work, and the type of attitude to adopt while this is really, really effing hard. How can you get through it with a positive mindset, even while you actually feel like you're losing your mind? And that this has a bigger purpose in your life and in your child's life and in your family's life than just to be there to cause you struggle and pain. So Jeanette's philosophy and perspective is just beautiful. She is also just, like I said, a kick-ass businesswoman. So she's like the triple threat, man. The wife, the mom, and the career lady. And she and I definitely vibe on both of those. If you want to follow Josie's story, you can check her out on Instagram. She has over 40,000 followers, and it's all for Josie, ALL, the number 4, JOSIE. And it's just this, again, this beautiful little girl with such this incredible resiliency and spirit who has gone in and out of the hospital and is now home and cancer free after this wild 2.5-year journey. But without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this conversation and get a lot of inspiration and love from it. Here's Janette Schwendeman talking about her daughter, Josie, and their journey through acute lymphoblastic leukemia, also known as ALL. Hi, Janette. Welcome to What Nobody Tells Us.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. I have to give a shout out to your husband, Casey, who was the one who got in touch with me initially and was like, my wife is a hero. She has been managing our daughter's pediatric cancer for the past over 100 days at this point in time. When he got in touch with me, and I think she'd be an amazing guest. And so then you and I got in touch, and I was like, oh my God, we are so in simpatico.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm thrilled.
Thank you. Yes, he is certainly my better half and an amazing man. So I wasn't surprised when he reached out, but I'm glad we were able to connect because I think we could be friends.
100. Oh, without a doubt. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we've had so much fun talking. And it's just such a real, open, relationship. So I'm excited to have you share your experience with the world, to not just raise awareness, but to obviously like celebrate your wins, but to let everybody know that's going through this, like they are not alone. So
Absolutely.
There's a lot to cover. I'd love to start, if you don't mind, just talking a little bit about yourself and about your family and your professional life before Josie's diagnosis, if you can even remember what life was like before that.
Absolutely. So there's a saying out there that says ignorance is bliss, and I missed that life. And I would relate my life to a normal upbringing, a very driven life where I followed all the rules. I went to high school, did my bachelor's degree, got my master's degree, strived in my career to progress and grow any way that I could. I met my husband when I was 23 years old, and we got married at 26. We bought our first house. We followed the rules of getting 2 puppies, which was not something I'd advise prior to kids. 2 puppies, and then we followed with children. So we had my first daughter at 2014, my son in 2017, and then we completed my family in 2021 with another little girl, Josie.
Yay.
Yeah.
How did you and Casey meet?
So you might remember the days of MySpace.
Oh God. Yes. I do. Early days, yes.
Surprisingly, there was an advanced search feature on there, and I looked for my perfect man, and he was I looked for, just characteristics that I found that I liked, which was 6'3", Christian, Caucasian. I wanted somebody college grad, so I didn't have to deal with school. I was done already. And
Yep.
I wanted somebody close, so within 10 miles. And he was the only guy that popped up in LA. So
Oh my
he
God.
was my default. We met at his favorite restaurant, and that was Chipotle.
Stop. That's so
And it
funny.
was just, the rest was history. I really do think it was love at first sight, love at first conversation. He's just absolutely my soulmate and completes me.
What was the hardest thing you and Casey had to go through prior to Josie? Because a lot of relationships can be made or broken by experiencing a trauma or an illness of themselves, of a family member, of a child. But had you guys had any sort of trials or tribulations that you'd overcome prior to Josie?
No, honestly, nothing outside the normal of losing a grandparent or, going through school together, navigating finances as a young couple, but nothing that was out of the ordinary, which brings me back to ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah, it is. Amen. And then talk a little bit about your business, because again, I just want to set the stage of like, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're wildly driven career woman, business owner, who, you and I are very similar in that way, and obviously many other ways as well. But talk about kind of your business and your business acumen and like what role that plays in your life.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been passionate about finance and helping people succeed financially since I was 18 years old. I got in finance and got my licensing to be a financial advisor when I was 23 years old and went down that path with different financial institutions. And then when I was around 30, I just wanted to be independent and work for strong families, like-minded families that I could care about and partner with. I became a certified financial planner so I can help them navigate their finances. And it's something I prayed to God about, that how can I use my skill set to bless other people? And it was all around finance. And so I co-own an investment firm in Tempe, Arizona, and we just love on our clientele.
I love that. Okay, so thank you for setting the stage. So you have two kids, before Josie, obviously, and you got two kids, two dogs, your husband, your home. You're following all the rules, doing all of the things. You've got this beautiful nuclear family, and then you are pregnant with child number three. So can we? I'm setting that stage. Can you take it from there and let us know what happened?
Sure. So we always had that big debate if we should have two kids or three kids. That was a big passion of mine, of having three. And I just had this strong feeling that there was a little girl up there that I needed to bring down from heaven. And I just felt so strongly about it. So convinced my husband about the third child. And when we were pregnant, I just felt so complete. When she was born, I felt so complete. And her name aspired from those reasons of being Josie, because it does mean God will add. And I just knew that she was meant to be here, meant to complete our family. So I was just the happiest I ever have been. My three kids complete. I owned my investment firm, helping my clients, and just felt on cloud nine, right? Until November 17th, 2021, when I took Josie in for her 2-month checkup. And that's when I was advised, because of her extended stomach, um, you kind of chalk up an extended stomach to, oh, maybe we need to switch to formula. It's not working with breast milk, or, maybe she's very gassy, or I don't, whatever baby problems there are.
Yeah.
But they really encouraged me to go to the ER. We got an ultrasound, and that is the day that I received my daughter's diagnosis. So it was a hard day.
And what was the diagnosis?
So that day, they came into the room after the ultrasound and the blood work, and I was told she has acute lymphoblastic leukemia with KMT2A gene rearrangement. And they gave her a poor prognosis of 35% chance.
Oh my gosh. By the way, that diagnosis just rolls off the tongue, as every other one does.
Right. Yeah.
Brian's too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And I know it's not fun to go back to that moment. But if there are parents who are in a similar moment, who have experienced something similar, what happened in your mind? Because you went from a regular doctor's appointment where you're thinking, oh, there's just something going on that's normal baby problems, like you said, to getting an ultrasound and a fairly critical diagnosis, regardless of, there is a chance for survival, but it's your baby, it's your third child. So where were you in your mind, and you and Casey?
Yeah, when you're told your child has cancer and has that poor prognosis, a paralyzing would be a good word.
Yeah.
And pure trauma. You just fall to the floor and you become crippled of the unknown, the uncertainty, if you're going to lose this precious child, and what this journey ahead will look like for her. So, I can't paint it lightly, other than I was on the floor of the ICU room. I don't think I stopped crying for a week.
Yeah. Yeah. I was breathing into a paper bag when we got Brian's diagnosis. And they moved me to the back of the medical facility to not scare the patients in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, and I don't want to understate like the visceral reaction that people have when you get a diagnosis about your loved one, because it absolutely, like you said, it paralyzes you and it breaks you. Like that's the moment of truth. There's before, and then that is the moment where everything is different forever.
Forever.
So
Crippling.
how did crippling, how did Casey react? And was he with you?
So he was not with me. I was alone. I asked my mom to watch the other children. He came down to the hospital and he got the same information from the doctor. And, same. He was paralyzed, crippled.
Yeah.
Um, and we just grieved together in that ICU room for a very long time.
What did you do next? Because there's this phase of like hysteria and anticipatory grief right away, and panic and shock, really shock. And then you have to kind of figure things out in a way that you've never figured out before because you know nothing about this. It's like, welcome to the world of cancer. So how did you start to navigate that?
Sure. So I think you start drinking from a fire hose, learning everything you can about this diagnosis so that you can make informed medical decisions for your loved one.
Mhm.
So here I'm thinking, here's this innocent baby going to go through so much, and I am her advocate, and I know nothing,
Mhm.
right? And granted, we're surrounded by an amazing medical team, but being informed is so important so you can make those educated decisions when the time is needed. So I think drinking from a fire hose would be number one. And then the second would be, how am I going to navigate this? You're thinking, gosh, I own my business. My husband works. We have two other kids. I mean, it's a complicated life. How are we going to navigate this? Would be the next one.
How did you navigate telling your other kids what was going on?
I always went from the very beginning of being honest and transparent.
Mhm.
So, regardless that they were 7 and 4 at the time, you had to be honest because you weren't sure if you would lose your child along this path. And I
Yeah.
had to be very open.
Do you remember what you said?
I think child life at the hospital, they gave us like these little red cells and white cells and like little things that we could play around with 7 and 4 year olds
Mm-hmm.
and talking about,
Mm-hmm.
how the blood works. I think
Yeah.
they're 7 and 4 at the time, so it went quickly to playing with the items. But um,
Right. Right.
so just being very honest, like she's
Yeah.
making too many white cells and it can clog the bone marrow. And we're going to work as a family and as a medical team to retrain these cells so that she can have a great life and come home and be with her family. However, some
Mm-hmm.
things don't work out always. And these white
Yeah.
cells can continue to take over her body. And what could that outcome look like? So I didn't want any of those surprises. I wanted to be positive, like we're a strong
Mm-hmm.
family, we're going to get through this. But at the same time, you have to be honest.
Yeah. No, I 100%. Absolutely. I could not agree more with that, because it's also they can only understand what they can understand,
Right.
and then they'll start to understand more as they watch it start to materialize within the family,
Sure.
and the schedule changes and everything change. So how did you start to change your life? Like, what did that end up looking like in the early days, and then through, obviously you're 3 years in now, but in the early days, how did you arrange your schedule, and did Josie stay in the hospital for a long time in the beginning?
So Josie was in the hospital for 10 months inpatient. And
My
the
God.
very beginning, the diagnosis was difficult to hear. Here you're grieving your child's life, what she has to go through, the possibilities of the different outcomes. But also, this was during the pandemic, right? So you're
Yes.
hearing from the medical team that your child's going to be in the hospital for close to a year, fighting for her life, going through chemotherapy, intense chemotherapy because infant leukemia is a very aggressive form of leukemia with a poor prognosis. So it's aggressive
Mhm.
leukemia inpatient or during a pandemic. And I'm a nursing mom to this small child.
Yep.
So as a nursing mom, you feel like, well, the only thing I can give her is great nutrition. So I'll start taking all my vitamins and doing a great job eating and giving her the best nutrition I can. But then you get that you're not allowed to leave the hospital room
Oh my God. And with two other
and you're
kids and a
not
husband and a
allowed
business.
to have visitors. So, you're grieving your child's life, but then you start grieving your own and you grieve your own other kids. And it's a lot to
Yeah.
try to process in the very beginning. So, I would say that for close to 40 days, I definitely stayed at the hospital next to my daughter's side and grieved that process. And then, like any hard time in life. Like we're always going to go through these seasons of life where we're experiencing summer or spring. And I certainly was now experiencing my winter, right? Um,
Mhm.
Knowing that there will be another spring, there will be another summer. So, how do I pick myself up and navigate this the best way I can so I can look back and be super proud of how we did it, and also learn from the time when you were suffering and the time that you were going through such a hard and difficult time.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you've had a little bit of distance from it now, which shows because you're able to talk about it like, the way that I talk about Brian's cancer. It's like, okay, well, this and this and this and this and this, and it just sounds very normal. But I put myself in your shoes of getting the diagnosis and like literally standing in the hospital room where they're giving that to you, and then letting you know that your child has to be here for almost a year. And then, by the way, like as a nursing mom, you have to stay here and you cannot leave and you cannot have anyone come visit you. And like everything you know about your life has just drastically changed in every possible way. And for me, it would feel like the walls would be closing in. And, and again, like you just said, there will be spring, there will be summer eventually, but in that moment and then the weeks that followed, that's so incredibly difficult. Like, how did you manage your mental health? Did you FaceTime with your family all the time? Like, did your husband bring in help? Because again, it's during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, how did you actually manage that?
Yeah. So immediately my mother-in-law retired, came down and stayed with us, which was a huge, huge blessing. And my mother is here as well. So we have
Yeah,
a great support system. But, when you're in that hospital room, I think it's so important to look for the silver linings and the
yeah,
positives of the day. And so I would just train my mind to say, wow, what a blessing that I have the ability to FaceTime my kids. What a
yeah,
blessing that I have the ability to order from Chipotle, right? What a blessing that I'm in the United States of America and able to get the best medical care for my child. And so,
yeah,
you can always look at life as the glass is half full, half empty, but we have to find those positivities throughout the day, the silver linings in order to keep going. And I think that's really what made me strong throughout the process.
mhm,
They always, one of my favorite quotes is, you got to find joy in the story you're living. And I think we all had to come to that when we went through COVID and a pandemic and had to shift our lives. And now it kind of looked similar. I'm a very happy, positive person. I always have been. So, how am I going to find joy in the story
yeah.
that I'm living, despite that we're going through difficult trials?
We have a sign in our house that says something. Of course, I'm going to butcher it now, but something about dancing in the rain, and it's very very similar. And it's like find a way to dance in the rain, right? Like find a way to get warm in winter. All of these things kind of that we're alluding to, because otherwise it just becomes all consuming
Yeah,
for sure. And I love that you had that attitude, like, and you had the support system of your mother-in-law and your mom, thank God.
absolutely.
But were there any aspects of thinking about the things that nobody tells us? Like as you started to learn this world of pediatric cancer and leukemia, what were some of the things that nobody told you? Like, do you have any kind of revelations or epiphanies? You're like, oh my God, I wish I had known X, or
Right.
like, if somebody I know is going through this, I have to tell them these things.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I would say that when you're getting this diagnosis, you're getting it from a doctor, you're getting it from nurses, medical team, and it becomes extremely daunting. You're thinking, wow, most
Mhm,
people go bankrupt through cancer. I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people have bankruptcy, a lot of people in divorce. They're telling me that my
mhm,
kids might have PTSD, that they might need counseling, like all these negative things about this journey is going through your brain. And what I wish I would have known looking 3 years later is how much joy you can also experience through this difficult time, right? And how much life perspective you're going to gain. So, despite going through chemotherapy and all of the hard things, our mind has some magical power of boxing up the negative and putting it in the past. And I still can remember the day my daughter crawled, regardless if it was
Mm-hmm.
on an IV pole getting chemotherapy in a hospital room by myself. I remember the day she crawled, right? I remember the day that she took her first bite. I remember the day that, she had visitors. And I just remember the positive things or the positive
Mm-hmm.
people that influenced my life. And so,
Yeah.
trying to remember that even though we're going through these seasons of life of winter or storm, that you have to find the glimmers of rainbows throughout it, because they are there if you look, and they are there. They're always there. And so, just look through the clouds, find the rainbows, focus on the silver linings, focus the positives
Mm-hmm.
of the day, and keep going.
Do you have any specific moments? Because there's something actually, the fact that you were able to spend 40 days and 40 nights, very poignant in the hospital with Josie. Do you have any visceral memories of being with her, just the two of you, that really stand out from that time?
Yeah, I remember, laying in my hospital bed thinking, it was very hard. It's not the Hilton. They give you a real crusty
Yeah.
towel and a nice sheet that you can lay on, and the bathroom is very luxurious. And I'm laying on this bed, just grateful to have a bed, grateful to have the shelter, grateful to have the resources to help heal my daughter. But all night I could hear the beeping of the IV pole and the helicopters just continuously landing throughout the night, doing Flight for
Mm-hmm.
Life, and just remembering
Yeah.
how grateful we should be every single day to be able to bless others around us, to be blessed, and just to live with positivity and as much hope as we can.
Mm-hmm. So when did Josie come home?
So there was moments that she would come home, like we got breaks. So after 40 days, we'd come home for a week. Then we'd go back
Mm.
inpatient for 40 days. Then we'd come home for 3 days, back inpatient for 40 days. So it was like running a marathon and like trying to get to the next water break. Those moments when you could come home was like the water break, and then we'd go back inpatient, right? So it was a nice
Yeah.
reset. I would say she finally came home around August of 2022, if I had to guesstimate. So she was
Mm-hmm.
home. And back to your question of how I navigated it, I reached out to every cancer mom I could find that was navigating infant leukemia across the nation. There's only 90 diagnoses a year with what Josie has, so it's extremely rare. But I tend to find like, hey, how did you navigate this? What was the best way for you? How did you help your other kids? How did you maintain your career? What did you do? And I don't want to recreate the wheel. So I'm like, if somebody already figured it out, then let me know, right? So I'm talking to all these different moms. And the answer I found, Christy, was there's no one way. Everyone's life is just so different. And so many people encouraged me, like, hey, maybe you should get a counselor. So I called a couple counselors, and they were like, we'll help you grieve. We'll help you talk through the process. We'll listen to you. But what I really quickly learned, Christy, is like, I needed a life coach because I wanted to navigate this the best way I could. Like, my kids are still here. My daughter is still fighting. I still have a healthy marriage, and I'm not going to let cancer define me. I am absolutely going to fight this with the most grace, positivity, looking for those silver linings, looking for those rainbows as I can. So maybe it's not a counselor that I need to vent my feelings, but maybe it's somebody I need to say, hey, have you thought about navigating it this way? Or have you thought about how do you maintain all your pieces of life and keep it
Yeah.
going the best way possible?
Yeah. It's so fun. I've told this story before, but like I spoke to a few different counselors as well, like therapists during like the depth, a few different times that Brian has been like extremely ill. And I just gave up on it because I was like, it didn't help me. It helps a lot of other people, but no one was able to genuinely understand what I was going through in order to give me proactive like tools other than like self-care. You should go get a massage, you should do a thing, you should delegate XYZ. But also no one could ever tell me that Brian wasn't going to die. Like they couldn't take that away from the fear of all of this. So it was like it didn't work for me. But to have a coach, which is what I'm doing now, caregiving
Yeah,
coaching, to actually help give people the tools to do this is critical, because
critical.
exactly what you're saying, no one has a clue, and it's like we're all stumbling along blind. But you did such a smart thing, which is find community, which is such a massive
Yeah,
massive point of difference than someone who ends up like kind of isolating and just goes down the wormhole.
absolutely. And your position and what you've created is so crucial to a diagnosis or to a traumatizing situation like that.
Without, yeah, I mean, people need that so much. And I'm sure, I know you're paying it back with other moms now, but when I think about like parenting, and you come home for a week, you come home for 3 days, you go back out, what impact did that have on your other two children? And like how did it look, and kind of how did you spend your time together as a family when you guys were able to spend those times at home together before Josie would have to go back in again?
Yeah. So you really become like a third of a person, right? Like I was going to work in the morning, then I'd go to the hospital, and then I'd go home and tuck my other kids in. And it was just a real lean life. And I think
Yeah.
you quickly realize how precious the time is that you get with your kids. So there's not as much
Hmm.
scrolling on your phone or let me see what TV show is on, because all those moments become absolutely precious, right? To
Yeah.
spend the time with your kids. When you're in the hospital and you can't leave and you're in a hospital bed, you think, I would do anything to read my child a book to bed tonight, you know?
Yeah.
And we take so much
Yeah.
of that for granted. Um, to help them make sure that they were strong through this process, we would come home and be so positive, lots of prayer, but we did a hands in all the time when we would leave, and we would go Schwindeman strong, and we would, put our hands in and go Schwindeman strong and keep them extremely involved in the process. So we talked from the
Yeah.
very beginning that, hey, everybody has a really important role during this process. And we included them from a toy drive to, we started a blood drive, like just having them hand out cookies, but making them feel part of the journey was really important.
Mhm. It also sounds like you made them feel like they were making a difference too,
Yeah, no,
like out in the community and at home. Like again, I love the idea that you gave them a special role, not just at home, but out in the world.
yeah, absolutely. So it's, we got this card, but God gave us this card for a reason. And how are
Yeah.
we going to come out of it stronger as a family, but also bless others around us through the journey and help others navigate it the best way possible? So,
Yeah.
my daughter put on a toy drive, and it was amazing to see her light up and give toys to the hospital and the kids that were inpatient. We went around
Mhm.
on Chris or Thanksgiving and gave out like little light up Christmas trees. And I don't know, it was just so important to me to see how can they come out stronger, because I got that information of, oh, they might have PTSD or they might need to see a counselor. And I'm just thinking
Yeah.
as a mom, like, not, no, we're going to figure this out.
Did you ever have, or did they, your other two kids, especially the older one at the time, explain to you or express to you any struggles that they were having around it, or ask any like hard questions, or like having that one-on-one time with you, or was the one-on-one time focused on them and only them, and not on continuously around Josie?
We definitely had hard conversations, but for the most part, I would focus on what's going on in their life. What's important to them, what conversations they're having at school, what's hard for them, what's good for them. Um, I tried to focus on their life.
So when Josie came home permanently the first time for like a long time, what did that look like for your family, and when was that?
So around August 2022, she came home, and it was supposed to be for good. However, you become kind of numb to it. Like you're just nervous and scared of when the ball's going to somewhat drop. So we were excited.
Yeah.
Um, Josie was very immune compromised. So similar to COVID, you
Yeah.
can't have a party, you can't have people over. So our life has shifted in that regards, that my kids have asked, like, why don't we have people over anymore? Why don't we have a family barbecue? And it's limited to protect Josie. So that's looked different. But we celebrated, we've created our new normal, and we're just very excited to be home.
So what happened after that? How long was she home for?
So Josie has always had some interesting test results, which resulted us in going to Philadelphia Children's for second opinions. We have complete trust in our medical team, but I think during a cancer diagnosis, having different perspectives and different opinions is important. So we flew Josie out to Philadelphia Children's, and that doctor had told us very early on that 99% sure Josie would relapse. And so we kind of always knew it would happen. We were just waiting for that ball to drop, but we wanted to embrace every moment we could, right? So challenging being a working mom, a working dad, two other kids, trying to really value the time you have as a family, because you're not sure when you're going back into the hospital. Josie ended up relapsing in October 2023. She had some low-grade fevers. We brought her into the hospital, and that's when we got the traumatizing, paralyzing news again. We were like living this very normal life, back to your daughter is relapsed, and she'll be back to fighting for her life.
Oh my gosh. Did you stay in touch with the Philadelphia doctor after her relapse? Did that become her primary care team, or did you stay with the one in Tempe?
No, so I absolutely adore our hospital team at Banner Desert in Mesa. They are incredible. So, but I also believe in bringing in other specialists and resources just to have a second opinion. So my doctor has always
Yes.
Zoom called with other people. So we went to Philadelphia
Amazing.
Children. We also had Seattle Children's, all kind of partnering what was the next best course for Josie.
That's incredible, without a doubt. I mean, it's second and third opinions, and having a team that's not egotistical, that's willing to collaborate with other teams
Yes.
is everything, without a doubt. So since a relapse was possibly and probably inevitable, when it happened, what was, you've mentioned you're kind of numb to this, waiting for the other foot to drop, right? But at the same time, what was your response when you did get that relapse diagnosis?
I mean, no matter what, it's traumatizing, it's paralyzing,
Yeah.
and it's very scary. But we already knew exactly what we were going to do about it.
Yeah.
So it was more boots on the ground. Like, we're going to fight this, we're going to go after this, and we're going to win, right? So
Mm-hmm.
navigating it with as much positivity as we can, but also it gave me time as a mom. I can't help myself being a business owner and just I put in processes, right? That's what we do. Like,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
how can we delegate? How can we use our support system? How can we ask for help? And how can we put things in place so that should that happen, we're ready to go. So
I I love that. And like Brian's doctor also told us years and years ago, he's like, I can't prove it. He's like, but more than 50% of this battle is mental. It's your attitude.
yeah.
He's like, and a lot of people who don't have a positive attitude, he's like, you see a very quick decline. And like, just again, that you are a go-getter in every possible way, shape, or form. And to be the go-getter for your family, for your business, for yourself, for your relationship, and be like, no, we are going to do this, and we're going to do it well, and we're going to be positive and grateful no matter the outcome. That is a very difficult thing to do. So I just want to like acknowledge, like, kudos to you for having that. I know it's just like innate in you, but it's not, these are not easy things to go through at all.
No, absolutely. And, credit to you for navigating your career to help people find that as quickly as you can through the journey, because it will come at some point.
It will. It will. The learnings are absolutely there. It just, you have to get there. So tell me what happened next after the relapse.
So Josie's relapse, we were back inpatient for about 40 days. It was just the absolute hardest time. Like, Josie,
How old was she then?
so she was about two and a half.
Gosh, so she's lived the majority of her life at this point in
Yeah.
time in the hospital.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So 2.5. And so we went through chemotherapy, and it was just hard on her body, like just extremely hard. And she ended up, her organs got swollen and they were possibly leaking, and surgeons had to come in and say, if we have to operate, there's a 20% chance that she'll live. And so all of these things are just extremely traumatizing. But on top of that, she was on steroids. I don't know, steroids make you extremely
Mm,
hungry, right? And
yeah.
her diagnosis with her intestines, she couldn't eat or drink for 7 days. So here you
No.
have a 2.5-year-old on steroids, begging for food, begging for water. And as a mom, you can't give it to her because it's her life, right?
Oh
But
my
she also
God.
can't understand, why will you not give me a drink of water? Why will you not
Of
give me my
course.
goldfish? And trying to entertain a 2.5-year-old in four walls, you can't leave because
No.
she's immune compromised, becomes
Yeah.
extremely challenging.
This is far harder than the initial year, really. What did she have a feeding tube, or how did she get any sort of nutrition in her if her intestines weren't able to, like, how did you manage
Right.
that
So a
with the
feeding tube would
doctors?
actually go through her body, which that's what we were trying
Right.
to avoid, to allow her organs to heal. So it was just
Right.
all through IV, like,
It was all through
yeah,
IV, everything. Oh
TPN.
my gosh.
But just
This,
extremely
yeah.
challenging. Like a little baby on steroids wants to eat,
Yeah.
and she would just be pulling at the fridge, and you couldn't do it. It was very, very challenging 7 days. So after the 40 days, though, we continued with treatment at home. She wore a backpack with her chemotherapy in her backpack. It was a
Hmm.
continuous drip for 28 days through her port. And she did that
Wow.
for about 2 months. And we got the great news that she was in remission. And we
Hmm.
ended up being able to go to bone marrow transplant in Tucson, Arizona. So
Okay.
grateful to have the news that my son, who wanted to be the donor from the very beginning, was a 100% perfect match for my daughter.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So you didn't have to look elsewhere. You started just with your
Yeah.
son and it was a perfect match.
Yeah. There is a 25% chance a sibling will be a perfect match. And Caden was that, and honored to do it at just 6 years old. He didn't
Oh
have
my
a
God.
tear in his eye throughout the whole process. It was absolutely incredible and a miracle, really, to watch. To watch your son go through that was really something hard and special at the same time.
What, so I'm familiar with the overall idea of like a bone marrow transplant, and like the idea of like once it's done you have to be in a bubble for like 100 days and all of those things. But in order to do that, like what does that entail? Like what did your son have to go through
Right.
in order to be a match and then to donate?
Sure. So once he discovered he was a match, it was very important to keep him extremely healthy, because
Sure.
we had to basically kill off all of Josie's cells. You almost bring them to close to death, and then you
Yeah.
pour the donor cells into the body and let them come back, right? So if Caden was sick, I mean, it would have been devastating. So we had to quarantine him, keep my other
Hmm.
daughter away, right? And so that's where you just call in the enforcements, the community, to support you. So my daughter
Yes.
lived away from us for 3 weeks to a month. My son was quarantined. I was in the hospital with Josie.
Oh my God.
And when Josie's cells became, and my mother-in-law was amazing support, like rotated me out of
Hmm.
the hospital. So I didn't do this alone by any means. Like,
Yeah.
you definitely find your community, you find your support, and you figure it out. But so when Josie's cells are down to nothing, Caden donated through a like small Broviac, I guess you can say, like a line placement in his chest, and he
Okay.
donated his cells. So not bone marrow, but actually his cells, to replace Josie's
Oh.
bone marrow.
Oh my gosh. So Caden's cells are now in Josie's body, helping to rebuild Josie from
Yeah,
scratch.
yeah.
And when did this take
So
place?
this was January 15th, 2024. We started this journey. January 25th, Caden's cells went into Josie. She slowly started to rebuild. After 25 days, she was back at home, and we kept her very safe for 100 days. And we got the word that she's in complete remission and 100% donor cells.
And when did you get this news?
30 days after transplant. So February 25th, 24.
So for the past 3 or 4 months, she has been 100% in remission
Yeah.
because of the transplant from Caden cells.
Yes.
How do you even, when you think about this, like in your quiet moments, like when you have very rare quiet
Yeah.
moments, but when you think about this, what do you think about? Like what comes to mind for you? How do you feel about all this?
Incredibly blessed, like
Mm,
grateful. Because I had the opportunity to be here, I've watched so many, childhood cancer stories that didn't end this way. And, you just don't know with anybody, including ourselves, when it's our time. And I've watched, you're just immersed in the childhood cancer world that unfortunately you see a lot of people lose the battle. And so I
yeah,
can't help but just be extremely grateful for the life of my daughter right now.
absolutely. Does it feel surreal to you the last few years, looking at everything that's happened and everything you just described?
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely feels like a bad nightmare that foxed up,
Yeah.
but also so many of those good moments through that time too.
Yeah. Did you talked about community when you came home, and I'm sure you would give updates to friends throughout all this, or did you ever appoint a friend or a family member to be the person to give updates to friends? Because it can get overwhelming giving updates to everyone who wants to support.
Right. So as we talked about that counselor situation and how that didn't work out for you or for myself, and I
Yeah.
navigated to like a life coach, and that ended up being my best friend because she knew me
Mm,
better than anyone already,
yeah.
and she owns a investment firm in Newport Beach, so very similar
Mhm.
situations. She has 3 kids, and so she always helped navigate, you know, this journey with me. So I'm forever grateful for that. But she coordinated, a meal train with my neighbors. She plugged me into different resources, so she was kind of the go-to when people wanted information. But I mean, it really takes a village, and it makes you need to step back and kind of analyze our lives. Like, are the right people in place that
Yeah.
we would need if something was to happen in our lives? Do we have the right careers that would back us up? Do we have, the right bosses that would support us and
Yeah.
focus on building that throughout our lives? I'm very grateful that, I had a great partner. I have amazing employees, and I've
Mhm.
put those processes in place. I've never turned on my out of office. Um,
Wow.
that, I felt very supported in my community. So not only from work standpoint, but the friends and the family, but not everybody has that. And so
Mhm.
I would challenge just to all of us to look at our lives to say, do we have those right people in place? Because as soon as you
Yeah.
get this diagnosis, all the self help books, all the things that you read that's like learn to say no or delegate more or, you know, um, build your community, like all the things that we read become no choice. Like you have no
Yeah.
choice but to delegate, but to ask for help, but to lean on people and to build your community and to learn to say no.
Yeah.
You know, I
Without a doubt.
I was plugged into so many networking, and I was on the board of the Phoenix Zoo, and I quickly had to say I got to cut off every aspect that's just not important right now.
That is such. I mean, it's not just great advice in this scenario. It's great advice in general, and sadly, it comes too late for so many people, or it never comes at all. That advice, to prioritize and really see: are you surrounded by the right type of people? Are you supporting yourself through the right type of work, the right type of employees, all of that, or boss, like you said, to actually support your life? That is write that down, people who are listening. What kind of as you think back on where you are now, but just over the past few years, kind of what overall has Josie's illness changed your perspective and like long-term goals or priorities in life overall?
I'll focus on one thing that might help answer that question is like you gain a lot of relationships through this journey, like people
Hmm.
that I'm just so blessed to have in my life. I've strengthened so many friendships, I've gained new friendships, but I've also lost a few along the way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to not focus on why. Like, why did I lose those relationships? What happened? And being able to be okay with like not having closure and focus on watering the seeds that are growing. Like, there's
Mhm.
so many seeds, there's so many blessings around your life that I'm going to water those plants. I'm going to water those seeds because they're blossoming, they're growing, versus like trying to figure out why the dead plants happened.
I know, like our brains are programmed to focus on the negative, like as humans, and it can be really. I've had the exact same thing happen, and it can be really hard not to focus on the, well, where did they go and why, and be so hurt from that. But
Right.
you're exactly right. Like it's really hard to do, but you do have to let that go and then focus on nurturing and like building those little seeds and those little like sprouts. Because my God, I like the way I like to say it is like other angels take their place,
Right.
and a lot of times those angels have experienced trauma themselves,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And I've said that a lot in these episodes, but it's absolutely true. There are people who have experience and people who can't. And if some people literally cannot come with you on this journey, they just can't because they've never met themselves in that way. So they
Absolutely.
can't meet you there
Right.
either.
And you can't be upset or angry about it. I've learned through this process that not everybody knows how to support you. And so you have
Yeah.
to ask for it. If you're trying to support somebody that is going through a difficult situation, just do and don't ask and don't try to
Yeah.
figure out. Just do something to feel
Yeah.
supportive. Um, but life perspective, back to your question, I was walking through Lowe's and I was watching this couple on a Saturday like fight about this light fixture, and they were just arguing about like what light fixture and we've all been there, like what color should we paint the
Mhm.
walls, or like I don't like the picture there, or whatever the argument is in our household. And it's just perspective. Like, we're not taking this stuff with you. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
financial
Yes.
advisor and I'm just going to say, like, you're not taking it with you and it doesn't matter. And
Mhm.
so what can you humor yourself with picking out the light fixture and having fun with it, because and
Yeah.
let it strengthen your marriage versus let it break you down, right? But there's a lot of cancer moms that have said like, I can't hang out with other people because they're griping about insignificant problems, and then here you are just trying to fight for your child's life or your husband's life. And
Mhm.
I've tried to put it in perspective that like, what a blessing that that's their biggest problem on a Saturday afternoon. like
That's yes.
like that is
Yes.
absolutely great that they are picking out a light fixture today.
I empathize with those cancer moms who say, or cancer wives who say the exact same thing. But I've also said the same thing. I think I told you this one of our earlier conversations to Brian, where when he's on a great upswing and he's feeling really, really great right now, when he gets like pissed off that the mailman like hasn't delivered by a certain time, or is like annoyed by XYZ, the Ring camera has to be charged. And I always look at him and I'm like, there was a time where we would have given anything for that to be the biggest problem in our day. So if that's what you are despondent about right now, we are having a beautiful day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, that's it. And then he's always like, oh, I'm like, okay, well, good. I'm glad that you're annoyed by me reminding you of this,
Yeah.
because that shows that you're in a good
Right.
headspace.
And we're going to have those times, but to recognize, like,
Sure.
let's celebrate the springtime and the summertime and be ready for the storms in the winter, because they are coming. They will come in
Yeah.
everyone's lives. So celebrate the good times and just be ready for when it becomes winter.
Yeah, that is such beautiful advice, because everything's temporary, right? The highs and the lows are all temporary. I like to do a final word in my episodes, kind of think. So first of all, like thank you for sharing so much, and I'm so thrilled that Josie is still 100% donor cells from Caden. That's incredible. What what would you say to families who are going through this right now, and they're in the winter, right? And it's like you kind of alluded to it with like, look out for the spring and the summer, but what advice would you give that maybe no one else is giving to them since you've been through it?
So, top things that come to my mind is focus on the silver linings, find the rainbows in the storm. Allow this time to strengthen you from a foundation standpoint, and try to dance in the rain.
Mm-hmm.
Find joy in the story you're living, and seek seek support, seek people around you to help you navigate it the best way that you can, so that when it is over and you will experience summer again, you can look back and be very proud of how you navigated that difficult time.
What's next for Josie? Is it just watch and wait right now? And are you building her immune system to kind of be out in the world and start anew, or what's happening now?
Yeah, so similar to COVID, you start opening up lightly, right? You pick your risk that you want to do. Maybe you go to Costco, but not on a Saturday afternoon, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you go to a restaurant, but you eat outside and stay away from people. So you navigate a new norm, you open up a little bit, and you just celebrate every single day.
Did Josie just celebrate her third birthday, or when is her
So her
birthday?
third birthday will be in August.
In August. Okay.
Yes.
Oh my
So
gosh. How does she describe this to, like, about herself? What is her perspective on all this now that she can talk a little bit?
She is a normal 3-year-old that I would consider almost advanced. I mean, she's incredible. She's resilient. She's strong. She's kind. Um, and she knows no different. I was hugging her the other day saying, Mommy will never let anything happen to you, because I think she was scared of a spider. And I just teared up because that wasn't true. That wasn't
Oh.
true. But she just has the best perspective on life and is enjoying every moment.
Oh my God. As should we all.
I'll tell you, we're planning a trip to Disney World in March of next year. And if I can watch that little girl in a princess dress march into Disney World, I'm going to lose my mind. So I'm
Yeah,
very
and you
excited.
will.
So
And you
so
will.
life distractions, things to look forward to during the journey are also very helpful.
Very helpful, without a doubt. Oh, Janette, thank you for sharing. Thank you for telling. It's also nice to kind of memorialize these stories, and so you can have this, and like Josie can listen to this one day too. Your other kids can as well, to kind of hear mom's perspective on the story as everything happened. So, but just to raise awareness and to let other moms know and other dads and families know that they're not alone in this, and to give them some really wonderful, emotional and practical tools. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for being a blessing to the career path that you've chosen. So can't wait to see everything you accomplish.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Well, that's it. Another episode of What Nobody Tells Us. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you felt something. I hope you learned something. And I hope you feel empowered to go reach out to somebody who might be going through something you don't understand. Lean in, ask the questions, make the connection, be the friend who starts the conversation. I can't tell you how much it will mean to someone. If you have ideas for further topics, please reach out to me. I love hearing from you. Your emails and your tweets and your texts and your Instagram DMs are so welcome and so amazing. If you want to hear more, every episode is available on my website, christiebishop.com. That's Christiebishop.com. You can find all previous episodes, and you can also book me for speaking engagements, for training, coaching, and marketing consulting. I've only been doing that for the last 20 plus years. It's one of my first loves. So again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I'm Christy Bishop, and this is What Nobody Tells Us.